morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Brain Health with Dr. Kelly Prill. I'm so excited to have her join us today. She's going to be our host and our instructor and leader for the next couple weeks, giving us the 3 ingredients for brain health. I'm just, like I said, really excited to finally get a really great speaker and a program going. So thank you, Dr. Kelly Prill. Tell us all about yourself.
Thank you, Dodie, for the introduction and having me here. I'm very, very grateful to be here. My family just moved here almost 2 years ago, and we totally fell in love with Silverton. So much that I decided to move my entire practice from Portland into Silverton. So I just want to welcome everyone to the first talk of the Brain Health series. Today I'll be discussing the foundations of brain health and how every symptom is a message from your brain and body for help. I've tried to really simplify brain health to make it more accessible to everyone by dividing the necessary components to brain health into 3 ingredients. Before we get started, I am Kelly Prill. I'm a naturopathic physician and functional neurologist at Elemental Wellness here in Silverton. I work with people to regain vitality, energy, and mental clarity. My passion is optimal brain health and dementia prevention, and making this simple and accessible to everyone. My goal is to educate and motivate positive change through diet and lifestyle changes. I use natural medicine and functional neurology to balance, build, and maintain brain health. It's all connected, the brain, body, mind, and spirit, and there is not a pill, supplement, or even an herb that's going to change everything. Understanding the foundations to brain health address all systems in the body and how daily lifestyle and nutrition choices affect them. Many people know what they should do, but oftentimes do not know why. I hope to bridge this gap while creating realistic health goals. As we get started, please write down any questions that you have during the presentation, and if we have time at the end, we can go over them at that time. Over the next 3 weeks, I will be discussing 1 ingredient each week and why it is crucial to brain health and how daily lifestyle and nutrition choices either create or eliminate symptoms. And lastly, each week, I will leave you with 5 take-home tips that you can put into practice right away. Today, I'll begin the discussion on the 3 ingredients, dementia, and how these foundations naturally address cognitive decline. Everyone here has these 3 ingredients because you are breathing, eating, and moving. But do you have the ideal recipe for your brain health to think, work, and live your best? According to the World Health Organization, an estimated 50 million people currently have dementia, and 10 million new cases are diagnosed every year. Dementia is heartbreaking, it's expensive, and it's on the rise. It is likely you know someone, live with someone, or are someone who is struggling with dementia. Early common symptoms include poor sleep, constipation, dizziness, memory loss, loss of smell, poor judgment. These are really common symptoms that we normalize in this society. To be clear, just because you have one of these symptoms does not mean you're going to get dementia, but they are early signs of dysfunction that need to be addressed. Dementia does not currently have a cure. Prevention is the best option. Understanding your brain's needs will help you stay healthy and vital. My passion is the brain and prevention of neurological conditions. It really is all connected, and knowing the symptoms message early on provides valuable information. So without further ado, let's talk about the elements needed to optimize brain function. The first ingredient to brain health is fuel. Note these ingredients are in order deliberately. Fuel creates the foundation. Your brain uses about 20% of the body's energy. Maintenance of neurons and communication via electrical signals requires a fair amount of fuel in order to perform. The brain never shuts off, and it does not have a reserve energy tank. So it must be consistently supplied the necessary fuel in order to maintain ideal performance. The brain is fueled by oxygen and glucose. Without these, the brain does not function. We all know no oxygen equals no brain function. But what about a little less than optimal oxygen? This is not a crisis, and the body is wise and it will recalibrate to get more. But what if the way you live your life daily is constantly causing a little less oxygen? The brain and body will start to send messages. They will be subtle enough to ignore or write off. But the brain and body will begin to show signs of dysfunctional fuel, like headaches, brain fog, feeling overwhelmed, trouble focusing, fatigue. As fuel becomes deficient, the brain begins to prioritize fuel, creating less than desired amounts of fuel in areas of the brain. These areas tend to be what the brain thinks are the least important areas, and this often does not translate to what you might think is high priority, like speech, memory, focus, and mood. Think of it like transportation. If you need to get from San Francisco to Boston, how will you get there? It depends on how much fuel you can afford to use and how the fuel is delivered. You can hop on a plane and get there quickly and efficiently, but this is a much more expensive fuel choice. If you cannot afford this much fuel or do not have it, maybe you hop in a car and take the longer, slower route to preserve the fuel. These are the choices the brain makes every day, and the amount of fuel it has access to is highly affected by your day-to-day nutrition and lifestyle behaviors. Like a plane or a car, your brain needs fuel to function. Instead of gasoline, your brain runs off oxygen and glucose. Without oxygen, the brain cannot survive, only a few minutes. Adequate oxygen is essential for brain growth and healing. Do you have just enough, more than enough, or less than enough fuel necessary to function fully? Less than adequate oxygen is not a crisis, but the brain still must recalibrate and prioritize. Subtle messages begin to arise, like mood changes or little memory blips that are easily written off or ignored as normal. Oxygen levels are based on breathing, posture, and a balanced biochemical environment. The benefits are endless. Oxygen slows down aging, it relieves headaches, relieves fatigue and depression, and also boosts the immune system. But how much oxygen do you need for optimal function? Let's try something. I'm going to set my timer here. Let's see here. All right. Okay, so when I say start, you're just going to count how many breaths you take. Don't overthink this. Don't change how you're breathing. Just breathe. So go ahead and start. One breath is one inhale and one exhale. Okay, now take your number and multiply it by 2. Note your number. Is it optimal? Between 10 and 12 breaths? Is it over 20? Or is it somewhere in between that gray area? For adults, healthy, adequate breathing is 10 to 12 breaths per minute. In my practice, I see 14 to 18 breaths per minute as the new norm in a fairly healthy population. While this is a small difference, it is enough to cause minor symptoms like fatigue and brain fog. Those extra breaths every minute create an imbalance of carbon dioxide, and brain cells do not get sufficient oxygen, leading to subtle symptoms like anxiety, fatigue, and that feeling of overwhelm. Over time, decreased oxygen to the brain begins to send more messages or symptoms, and it starts to send them much louder. While breathing is naturally involuntary, how you breathe is a more conscious decision. I love this dynamic. Your brain has your back, but you do have some choice in the matter. The way you breathe influences how much oxygen you intake and even activates or deactivates the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight, run from the tiger system. Stressful lifestyles have created shallow breathing and hyperventilation, and this is a precursor to chronic disease. Proper breathing is known as diaphragmatic or belly breathing. Let's go through how to take a proper breath. I realize this is basic, but it builds the foundation to better living, and it's accessible and free. And the truth is, most people are not doing it. I see this simple change powerfully minimize people's symptoms. So to start, just breathe normal. Place one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. Take a breath. Which hand did you feel rise first? Take note. Now with your next inhale, breathe through your nose at an even rate. But this time, allow your belly to expand first and then your upper chest, using the rise and fall of your hands as your guide. When you breathe out, you want to feel your abdominal muscles flexing at the end of that breath to help push all of the air out, creating that vacuum for a much bigger breath to come in. Now, in general, you would repeat this 5 times, and that's it. It's very simple. So my challenge to you is to do this 4 times a day for the next week until we meet again and see what changes for you. This simple breathing technique balances the brain by providing it with immediate and much needed oxygen or fuel. One more point on breathing. Talking and focused work are often triggers to low oxygen. They often create shallow breathing or breath holding. Begin to notice if when telling a story or talking to someone, do you have to rush a sentence before you run out of breath? Or do you have to catch your breath in between sentences with a giant gasp? Pay attention to see if symptoms worsen after a heart-to-heart or a phone call. This is a big change for those who love to talk. And I'm not saying stop talking, but more so to slow down. Find your breath when you speak. Speak with intention, and this will help improve oxygenation and brain health. Next time you do a project or creating something, also take note. Do you hold your breath when you're focusing? Many people are not aware of this, but in a fast-paced, highly focused world, this adds up to lower oxygen throughout the day. And again, subtle symptoms from the brain asking for more fuel. How you hold yourself greatly affects oxygen and fuel delivery to the brain. These days, most people are sedentary, working at computers, sitting at desks, or driving all the time. All of this causes a hunched over neck forward position. This not only squishes the lungs and they can't fill up to capacity, that creates shallow breathing. Shallow breathing, as we know, induces that sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight, run from the tiger. This uses up more fuel and creates a vicious cycle. Your neck should be in line with your ears and your shoulders. When your neck juts forward, it literally reduces the blood flow through the neck to the brain. This posture can also cause numbness and tingling and pain in your head, neck, and shoulders. Chronic forward positions change the shape of the spine, creating structural imbalance that has many side effects, including pain and inflammation. As with the second picture here, how often do you get in that arms out, heart lifted, chest open, neck upright position? Balance is important to brain health, not just in coordination, but much of the brain is divided into 2, and balance and integration between systems, front, back, side, and structure are essential to wellness. So stretch out and get some more oxygen to the brain with a deep belly breath. Posture determines the ability of oxygen to flow, but the entire nervous system relies on proper structure. All information travels up the nerves into the brain and back down into the body. So any aberrancy in this communication creates dysfunction and poor communication with the brain. Another reason why how you hold yourself daily matters. Correcting poor posture is vital to improving oxygen flow to the brain. Whether you work with a professional or intuitively change this, it is important for the brain to receive oxygen and to heal. A common cause of low oxygen to the brain is anemia. One way anemia occurs is the red blood cells that normally carry oxygen to tissues do not have appropriate nutrients and fail to deliver enough oxygen. And what's farthest away from your heart? Your feet, your hands, and your brain, which is upstream. Iron and B12 are the major players in oxygen delivery and need to be assessed. Basic blood work will help your doctor determine if you have anemia. Anemia is so often overlooked and undiagnosed, but when it comes to brain health, it's fundamental. You can get iron and B12 levels checked by your primary care physician. Find out if they are low or even suboptimal. If they are, you may need to address gut health, nutrient intake, or even medication side effects. All too often, I see the blood work look normal, but suboptimal levels create a rocky foundation, especially when the brain is asking for help. Glucose provides fuel to the brain. It's the other energy source for the brain. As I mentioned earlier, the brain needs a constant and steady supply of fuel. Glucose, as we know, comes from carbohydrates. The most common are bread, rice, grains, legumes, and of course, refined sugar. Fruits and vegetables are also great sources that are also high in fiber, which is directly related to brain health. Just like oxygen, the brain and body will compete and prioritize glucose if it is low, leading to minor symptoms at first. Glucose levels are measured by your blood sugar levels. Blood sugar regulation in the body ideally stays steady throughout the day. It should look like a straight line on a graph. As blood sugar becomes dysregulated, you will see peaks and valleys that look like a roller coaster and feel like one too. Every time blood sugar dips, it creates a panic message to the brain. And the brain says, okay, get me sugar in the quickest, easiest form. Only use a little and store the rest as fat because we are in survival hibernation mode. This creates little peaks and valleys, also known as the roller coaster. It also creates weight gain and stress on the body and the brain. These dips in glucose also specifically negatively impact attention, memory, and learning. These are common signs and symptoms that blood sugar is imbalanced. Think of the Snickers commercials. These again are messages from the brain that fuel is not adequate. And if it does not get balanced, consistent fuel, it will have to prioritize. If blood sugar is not regulated over time, this chronic issue becomes diabetes. This is directly linked to the brain, as Alzheimer's disease is also known as type 3 diabetes. Every time glucose and blood sugar fall too low, inflammation and panic occur biochemically. What you eat does matter. Foods high in sugar create the beginning of the addictive sugar cycle. Aside from unwanted weight gain and inflammation, too many carbohydrates trigger your stress response, affecting hormone balance and brain health. Balanced blood sugar is one of the foundations to healthy living and a better brain. The body is equipped to utilize carbohydrates in healthy doses. Refined sugar is a different story. It wreaks havoc on the brain and the body. Sugars are utilized and stored differently depending on their source. Not all sugar is created equal. This is why high fructose corn syrup and diet sodas are very inflammatory and part of the obesity epidemic. Eating a piece of bread versus drinking a glass of wine or drinking a soda all affect the body differently. Ethanol, fructose, and artificial sweeteners cannot even be utilized by every cell in the body, and they can only be metabolized in the liver. Overconsumption then leads to quick storage and inflammation. All refined sugar taxes the body, leading to the sugar addictive cycle in the brain, as well as issues with mood, gut, and immune health. Refined sugar is one of the greatest obstacles to health and wellness. The sugar industry uses manipulation along with the addictive nature of sugar to get you hooked. So let's go through the sugar addiction cycle and how it affects your blood sugar. Refined sugar actually creates neurotransmitter imbalance within the brain. When you consume sugar, your brain says, oh, wow, that tastes good. I'm going to remember that for later. The sugar then causes your blood sugar to spike, which then creates a cascade of events. One of the things that happens is the brain releases dopamine, and dopamine is your pleasure feel-good neurotransmitter. It's the one that says, oh, that sugar is really good. I really like that. Don't forget that next time. Then insulin is secreted, which naturally drops blood sugar and prevents damage from the sugar. High amounts of sugar equal more and more insulin secretion, creating more of a need for blood sugar regulation. High insulin causes immediate storage of sugar into fat. Low blood sugar signals the brain that it is hungry and needs more sugar. Hunger and cravings are created, and now your brain says, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm starving. These signals create the hunger response, specifically for sugar, because the brain is in panic mode saying, please give me that stuff that was really delicious and quickly gives me sugar. And now the vicious cycle begins again. This sugar cycle equals inflammation, which leads to brain fog, sleep issues like insomnia, and memory loss, and eventually can lead to neurodegeneration or loss of brain cells. What you eat does matter. Foods high in sugar create the beginning of the addictive sugar cycle and are often the beginning of an unhealthy cycle of inflammation that can lead to cognitive decline, among other chronic illnesses. Oxygen and glucose are the fuel for the brain and build the foundation, good or bad. Begin to assess how solid or rocky your foundation is. Start analyzing your daily habits and nutrition. What do you already do that supports fuel for the brain? And what changes can you make or fine-tune to optimize glucose and oxygen? While this may fall into the category of, I know I should do this, understand that the brain is counting on you actually doing it. Choose that you are worth it and commit to making a change to function fully. Now that you understand the importance of the first ingredient, here are some practices to put into place right away. For some of you, you may already do this, but see where you can fine-tune some of these. Balanced blood sugar is one of the foundations to healthy living, especially for a highly functioning brain. Let's go through the 5 tips to help prevent the peaks and valleys of blood sugar. Number 1, eat breakfast. While you sleep, the brain works overtime to heal and repair, using up all of that precious fuel. After fasting all night, the brain and body need to be replenished to start the day off balanced. Skipping breakfast creates stress and can start the initial dip in the blood sugar roller coaster. If you're not hungry in the morning, this is often a sign that the brain has been in survival mode and has actually turned off the receptors responsible for appetite. Follow the next 5 tips for 2 weeks and then reassess and see if you are actually hungry for breakfast. Note, if you do intermittent fasting, that's great, and it can be a great option for many. However, in my practice, I have seen that if blood sugar is not balanced first before fasting, it causes more symptoms and issues. Work with a healthcare professional to see what makes the most sense for your individual health. The second best way to balance blood sugar is to eat quality protein in every meal. Protein is harder to digest, and therefore it balances blood sugar longer. It also creates a full feeling after meals. If you often feel hungry or unsatisfied after meals, lack of protein may be the issue. Protein also helps reduce cravings between meals. Proteins are the building blocks, and they help neurons repair, and they balance the neurotransmitters responsible for mood. Protein does not have to be meat. Examples of protein include nuts, seeds, chia is really high in protein, eggs, legumes, quinoa. Quinoa is 40% protein. And healthy protein shakes are another great way to get your protein in. Just watch out for the hidden sugars and other ingredients in protein shakes. Eat smaller meals regularly. The brain needs food every 2 to 3 hours in order to reset out of survival and hibernation mode. Eating smaller meals also prevents glucose overload. These consistent meals create routine for the brain and prevent overeating while balancing blood sugar. This routine assures the brain and body it will get the nutrition it needs and slowly bring you out of panic mode while balancing blood sugar. After 2 weeks, reassess and see how many meals you need. Can you go 3 hours without food? 3.5? You get hangry. This is how you know how much time in between meals that is unique to you. Notice more energy, balanced mood, and healthier cravings, as well as you get your blood sugar balanced. As the brain comes out of panic mode, more fuel will be available overall. Limit caffeine. How many just said something under their breath to me? I'm not saying do not drink your coffee. And again, if you change how you do it, then you don't have to avoid it. Coffee has many health benefits, but the research shows that these benefits are from drinking 1 cup, maybe 2, and we're talking an 8-ounce cup, not the big jug. So after that second cup of coffee, the harm begins to outweigh the benefits. Coffee works because it causes the body to release adrenaline. If you fasted all night, then it is likely your blood sugar is on the verge of dipping or already has. To drink coffee before eating causes an extreme dip as it uses up more fuel and begins the roller coaster at full speed. Then the rest of the day is spent managing blood sugar instead of maintaining it. Caffeine can exacerbate your adrenal glands, which are responsible for stress, diurnal rhythms, and many other functions. This leads to coffee providing quick pick-me-ups, but more fatigue and stress long-term, requiring more fuel from the brain. Just make sure to eat breakfast before you drink that 1 cup of coffee or tea. If your body has fuel first, then it can handle caffeine more efficiently with less side effects and dips. And lastly, limit carbohydrate intake. Too much sugar in your diet spikes blood sugar. This is common knowledge, but it is often paired with a vicious addictive sugar cycle, making it really hard to stop this habit. Feeling sleepy or craving sugar right after a meal often indicates carbohydrate overload and the beginning of blood sugar imbalance. Healthy carbohydrates contain high fiber, including vegetables, legumes, and complex carbohydrates like quinoa. Avoid refined sugar as it immediately ramps up blood sugar and then quickly falls, leaving you feeling miserable as the blood sugar rapidly dips. If you're truly addicted to sugar, consider a sugar detox. Remember, the dopamine addictive cycle with sugar, it takes 3 days to break that cycle. After 3 days, the dopamine addiction cycle is broken and sugar cravings are now much more mentally, emotionally based, and they need to be addressed differently. Without adequate levels of fuel, oxygen and glucose, brain cells die, and function is slowly compromised. Without fuel, these neurons die, and neurodegeneration adds up and can lead to dementia. Proper breathing and eating right to balance your blood sugar not only relieves symptoms, but also allows the brain to operate in a relaxed state, which preserves neurons. Learning what these cues are and what to do can increase your mental clarity, memory, and mood. While you have fuel for your brain, it's time to start asking if you have the right amount. Dementia and brain conditions do not happen overnight. Start taking charge of your health, and your brain will thank you. Thank you for being a captive audience, and that wraps up the first ingredient to brain health. I'll be here next week at the same time to present the second ingredient, and thank you, Jody, for being an excellent host.
Thank you, Dr. Prill. That was very educational and so informative.